So I'm going to say something I haven't said for many, many years, and that is a new betting exchange is about to launch. I say about because I think I've discovered this before it was supposed to be launched. They're going to love me for pre-announcing it. But in this video, I was going to show you what I found already, who the new betting exchange is going to be, how it's going to be branded, but also we can have a discussion about what are the benefits of this particular exchange. So if you want to find out what that exchange is, just watch the rest of this video. So it can feel at times like the industry has been exactly the same for a very large number of years. Way back at the very beginning, you could probably believe that Betfair was at the forefront and pushing forward and creating the market. But the fact is there were loads of different companies that were all trying to muscle in on this particular space way back then. And you have to remember this was the .com boom. So there were loads of investors out there trying to do things to do with the internet. Money was getting thrown around all over the place. And there were loads of people with half decent business ideas that grabbed some of that money and ran with it and just then sort of thought, well, let's try and make this work. And that was pretty much how it worked at the start. It was a bit of a wild west. People were sort of saying, well, I've got this great idea. People were giving them money and they were going, okay, it's an idea, but how on earth do I make this work? So I joined Betfair like just 7 days after they opened for business, and you could be forgiven for thinking that Betfair was first, but there are actually loads of different companies around at the same time. Flutter, which Betfair eventually took over, but there were like scores and scores of different companies, and I signed up for all of them because I just felt that there was something interesting going on and I wanted to be involved. But probably the most famous, for want of a better word back then, of the companies that was trying to compete with Betfair was a company called Sporting Options. Now, most of you will have no idea who Sporting Options are or, any awareness of them at all. But the thing that they were most famous for, unfortunately, was not competing with Betfair. It was actually collapsing into administration. And that was because they wanted to compete with some of the bigger guys out there. And what they actually decided to do to encourage liquidity onto their exchange was they actually put the money in the market themselves. So rather than being exchanged, they ended up being on the other side of the book, effectively, the complete opposite of what you would expect from an exchange. And as a consequence, the markets were smarter than they were, and they ended up losing incredible amounts of money. And the founder themselves, or one of the founders, actually put some money in there to try and kickstart the thing to get going. So they lost a load of money as well. But when they collapsed into administration, the administrators got in there, realized that all of the client funds that were deposited there actually had evaporated in that market making seeding process. And there was no money left. So it was a bit of a scandal all the way back then. Betfair stepped in and did a sort of a bailout package, which is basically if you move your business to us and you trade with us enough, then we'll credit your account back on that. So that helped save some of those people. But yeah, right at the beginning, there were loads of exchanges. Everybody was trying to do their best to compete. That led to some of them seeding the markets, which ultimately led to them falling into administration. But yeah, there's an important part of this particular story about this new exchange, which is why I've thrown this in at the beginning. But let's try and understand exactly what this new exchange is and also how I found out about it. So many years ago, I was sat around a table with a group of investors and we were talking about a variety of different things. And they said, oh, have you done a scuttlebutt on it? And I was thinking, what's that? I learnt that the scuttlebutting, as it was called, it was just like a nickname, was the process of researching a company, digging a little bit deeper, not just looking at an annual report, not doing a couple of little things, but actually going much, much deeper than that. So one of the things I learnt was that people were going through the list of patents that a company was filing or the trademarks and just sort of digging at that extra level of information that was out there and publicly available, but that a lot of people weren't really looking at. They were trying to understand what was going on sort of behind the scenes of a company, in effect. And this sort of technique is something that I just continue to this day. When I'm sat down, I sort of find it very difficult to just do nothing. I'm either very active or I'm asleep. There's not much difference between the two. So I'll often sit down with a laptop or an iPad and I'm just flicking through information, researching, reading, constantly all of the time. And every now and again, I come across stuff that is quite interesting. And in this particular case, I came across something that was very interesting in the world of betting exchanges. So when you're scuttlebutting, it can get quite complicated because there are relationships between different companies, and some people don't own things directly, but by a third party, and it can get quite complicated. But after a while, you get used to that and you begin to understand the relationships between different things. So for example, everybody knows the Matchbook betting exchange, but that is actually registered under a company name of Tripplebet. And if you do some more research on Tripplebet, you find a lot more interesting things about that particular company, but that really needs another video. But also, for example, Smarkets has a sister company called Hanson that is directly related to how the exchange is operated on Smarkets. I will come to this in a second. But when I was doing that really incredibly exciting thing of browsing the Alderney Gambling Commission website, I had a look at Tripplebet and there was a new name on there. And that new name was a company called easybet.net. So of course, the first thing you do is start researching underneath that. And let me show you what I found. So if you visit easybet.net, you will find the website. It says powered by Matchbook, but you will also find a link to an app. So I don't know at this stage whether it's actually going to be a website or app only. Looks like it's probably going to be app only. But then you can obviously go off to the App Store and have a proper browse of exactly what the app does and how it's being marketed. But yeah, it looks like the exchange for the moment is going to be app-led, at least initially. So Matchbook have white-labelled the exchange to easybet. That's basically what is happening. I don't know the details of exactly how that's going to work and how the two interact with each other, because that will be a commercial deal between those two, so I can't tell you that. But that is what's happened, and white labelling is actually very common. If you go to any major trade show, you will find that there are loads of people offering you sportsbook white labelling solutions, casino, poker, and even exchanges. You can get white label exchanges if you want to, and that happens because one company or person has access to certain types of territories or customers, but they don't have the technology, but somebody else has the technology but not access to those markets, and so the two sort of come together for that particular reason. But you would have noticed that I don't use Matchbook or Smarkets, and that is because they're a sort of a hybrid exchange, really, because behind all of that volume and liquidity that you see on those exchanges, there are some very big market makers, and those big market makers are generating a lot of that liquidity, and therefore I don't sort of fit into that particular model, because nobody wants to have a sporting options moment again. And if you go into a market and you seed the market heavily and you let people like me and all of the BetAngel customers go up against that, they are probably smarter than those market makers. And I know that sounds like a bold statement to make, but it's true. That's how sporting options got into trouble. That's how any of the market makers or seeders can lose loads of money, because somebody out there obviously knows an angle on something. They probably have a bit more better knowledge, and if you win, they lose. It's a bit like a bookmaker, really. So the only option they've got is they don't want to lose money being a market maker or seeding a market. So the only option that they've got is to restrict you in some form or another. So basically, they don't want your business, and that is because you probably could win money, and if you do win large sums of money, it would probably destroy that particular business model. So that's why I don't, and I'm not particularly active on those exchanges, because I would almost certainly win money, and therefore I would be restricted, which goes against the whole ethos of everything that I sort of stand for. And Betfair and BetDAC are the two places where I can go in and do whatever I want. It's a proper market. You won't get restricted or banned, or you won't run into those sort of problems. And that's why I focus all of my attention onto those particular markets. But that's also why your Matchbook and your Smarkets aren't particularly keen on getting like thousands of BetAngel customers descending on their exchange, because in aggregate, you're probably a lot smarter than anybody on the other side. So there you have it. A new betting exchange is about to launch. I don't know when the official launch will be. I haven't attempted to contact them. If they want to let me know on this video when it's going to launch, that would be quite interesting. I may have accidentally pre-announced it for you. I'm sorry, but I did find the information is available out there. Other people are going to find it very easily as well. But will I be participating in it? Probably not. And it's an extension of the Matchbook brand by the look of it. And we'll have to wait and see just how all of that sort of works together when the time comes. But, let's look at some of the positives on this here as well. If there is a brand underneath the Easy brand group, then that should increase the reach of exchanges. Maybe that will increase the narrative around exchanges and allow us and other people to sort of get their message across in terms of what we do and why an exchange is generally a better place than a traditional sports book. And one thing I must say about Matchbook is their marketing is very good. When you look at the way they represent their brand and they represent the exchange, it's much, much stronger than you see from some of the other groups where the messaging has got very, very fuzzy. So I think Matchbook are very, very good at their marketing, and I think that that will probably flow over into this new exchange as well. So I think that that's probably going to be a bit of a positive. But yeah, let's see when this actually formally launches.